A few years ago, I was lucky enough to get to travel to Mexico. While touring some ancient Mayan ruins, we came across what our tour guide said was one of the few remaining hives of the Melipona bees, which is a rare stingless bee found in Mexico. Now at the time, I was not very interested in these bees, but I wish I had stopped and taken a little bit more time to appreciate everything that small hive of approximately 15 bees does for mankind. And it was both a very cool and sad experience to know that I was one of the last people to get to see that species of bees alive. Bees may seem irrelevant to many of you, but that is before you realize just how many things we rely on them that we could not create without them. With everything they do, they have the ability to completely alter the whole ecosystem around them, as the whole thing tends to revolve around them. Certain species of bees are rapidly disappearing, and many of the signs point directly to humans. Now that you know some simple things about bees, we can move on to some of the things they do that benefit us as humans, and that's just the hive of the Melipona bees. In the United States, our food demand is constantly on the rise. This puts a large strain on the bees. Now it's not like they go to bed every night thinking, wow, I have so many flowers and plants to pollinate tomorrow. No, it's not like that. Let's say we plant a square mile of nothing but pure corn. This is a big problem for the bees, as it can cause them to have to travel up to a mile just to find food, as there's no nutritional value for them in things like corn. According to Marla Spivak, more than 1/3 of the crop production requires pollination. In more than 80% of the United States, crops are reliant on being pollinated by bees. Although there are other pollinators out there, such as ants and butterflies, they could not do enough to sustain our society. We require bees. There are places in the world that have no bees, and it is in these places that you can find people being paid to pollinate by hand, which is a very slow and painful process that yields very poor results. Now that you know a couple of the ways bees work to benefit us as humans, we can move on to some of the effects they have on the ecosystems around them. Obviously, bees don't just supply food for us. If bees are happy, the whole society as a whole is happy. As stated by Sustain, bees act as indicators of the state of their environment. Their absence, presence, or quantity tells us a lot about the ecosystem as a whole and tells us what we can do to help it. By pollinating, bees are naturally conserving the environment. They create a more diverse population, and this just helps the whole ecosystem as a whole. According to Sustain, even if a plant is not directly pollinated by a bee, it benefits just from being in the same society as those bees. Because of the diverse population it creates, it stimulates the plant. Bees also love clovers and alfalfa, which are huge in the cattle industry for feeding them, so they play their parts in the meat industry as well. In a study in 2016 by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform, bees were reported responsible for between $235 and $577 billion in revenue each year. So not only do they play a huge role in the ecosystems around them, but our economy as well. Now that you have learned some of the effects bees have on the ecosystem around them, we can move on to some of the things we as humans do that harm them. The agricultural industry has changed a lot over the years. We now rely on herbicides and pesticides to keep our crops, clean of pests, and in turn, this kills a lot of the weeds that flower. And bees love those weeds. They rely on them for carbs and protein. So without them, they're in big trouble. According to Marla Spivak, she also said that we stopped planting alfalfa and now use synthetic fertilizers. And it is being found that these herbicides and pesticides are being picked up by the bees when pollinating and brought back to their hives. And so it affects the entire hive. Pesticides are a major concern at the moment. There's a debate on whether or not to use them. You know, obviously we need them to protect our crops, but there's no crops without bees, so it's a toss-up there. Today we've learned about some things that bees do for us as humans. They don't just benefit us, but the whole ecosystem around them. And while we constantly are demanding more from our bees, they are quietly disappearing. I hope I've shed some light on the unseen work bees do for us, and I hope you appreciate them a little more after today. Thank you.